One of the things that I'm not afraid of progress. You know what I mean? I'm not concerned about that. People are concerned, well, geez, the robots are going to do this and the robots are going to do that. Well, first off, who's going to build the robots? Other robots? I mean, and by the way, robots are going to break down. Who's going to fix them? I mean, try to find a good plumber, right, David? So I'm not too worried about progress creating or eliminating jobs, because there will always be jobs for the people that know to get the skills necessary for the next generation employment market. What I'm concerned about mostly is that the people that are more manual are looked down upon by the people that are less manual.
Welcome to The Outliers In, produced by the Operational Excellence Society and sponsored by Zonatech Consulting Group International, with your hosts, Joseph Paris and David Schneider.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of The Outliers In. I'm one of your hosts, Dave the Mule Schneider, and sitting over in Germany right now is JP. How you doing, pal?
Not so bad, not so bad. Nothing flying over my head yet, except for the normal traffic coming out of Frankfurt Airport.
Well, that's a good thing to have, as everybody gets excited about what's happening in the Ukraine. Over here on this side, we're just worried about everybody's got their Ukrainian colors on, but I'm more worried about robots right now. It's time for the robot kids to get their robot finished up for competition, and their first competition is coming up this weekend, and so there's a lot of excitement there. We have a operating robot as of this past Saturday, and so that's an important milestone, because that is the mechanical robot is assembled and the code is installed, and at least the code commands different functions to happen. Now, do they all work properly? No, but now it's debug and integration time. So lots of fun and excitement there.
So, speaking of, does it all work or not? Time will tell. I mean, obviously you have to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, right?
Yeah.
And not to be what you're not, and not to be what you are not.
Well, one of the things that I've learned with the robot kids, and we lived through this with virtual, is that for about a year and a half, they weren't exposed to the shop, and they weren't exposed to how to schedule mechanical work and how to do mechanical work. And so what we've seen this year, now that they're back in the shop, a lot of the tacit knowledge that they would have developed working in the shop as freshmen and sophomores, but now juniors, the leadership, the juniors and seniors who are leading this year, they're missing some tacit knowledge about how to use their equipment, what's a good cut and how to measure, and a lot of hands-on stuff that just didn't happen in that virtual world. And so they missed out on developing that tacit knowledge, that hands-on knowledge that you get. Now they have a lot of explicit knowledge, book learning. They got all that through the virtual side. We did all sorts of training virtually with them during the COVID season, but they didn't start to get their hands back onto equipment until this past fall. And what we discovered is a lot of those skills graduated, and we had people teaching younger people who really didn't know what they were doing, and so had to correct a lot of bad education that happened along with that. And that was a direct result of not having live in-person activity going on.
So does that remind you of a company recently in the news?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does. I was reading actually just yesterday and then today about Spotify, and Spotify announced, they had their recent earnings announcement, and they had their conference call. And in the conference call, they said they were going to invest $1 billion into their fulfillment network. Yes, $1 billion. And now they hit their revenue numbers. They hit everything that the analysts expect them to do. So you'd expect the stock to look really good, and they're planning on investing money into, but no, actually their stock price went down, because for somebody who's going to spend $1 billion, there wasn't any real background. They don't have a fulfillment system.
It wasn't just $1 billion.
Parties.
It wasn't just $1 billion, and their stock just didn't go down. It went down appreciably.
Yeah.
Or depreciably, as the case might be.
Yes. I mean, it was a pretty serious move. And you think of Spotify, and yeah, they make websites for you to be able to sell stuff on the internet, but most of their customers do their own fulfillment, or they have a third party that does their fulfillment. And the fulfillment by Spotify that does exist is through third parties, but it's a small amount of their business. And to go out and spend $1 billion on an infrastructure when you don't know what you're doing that scares off the investors, and the market reacted. And so it goes to, do you know what you know, and do you know what you need to do to be able to do it? And if you don't know what you need to know, and you don't know how to do it, then you better be freaking hiring people to do it. And there's no evidence of activity of that either.
It sounds to me like somebody might be climbing Mount Stupid.
Yeah, it is. And it's actually Shopify that we're talking about, not Spotify.
Right.
But Shopify, and it's interesting because Shopify bought a robotics company. They acquired a robotics company just in the past 6 months, Six River Systems. And Six River Systems was the people who founded that, or the core people who founded that, were the core people that came out of Kiva Robotics. And Kiva Robotics got bought by Amazon. And when Amazon bought Kiva, Amazon went, we won't sell Kiva anymore. Kiva's just for us. And Six Rivers guys went out, created a completely different robotics solution. And now they've successfully sold that off to another e-commerce play.
Right.
So I think that those guys are probably very good at figuring out how to build a platform that they could sell to somebody else.
So, let's think about Shopify for a second.
Yeah.
And their, ascent up Mount Stupid, as they are. Shopify is mostly a technology play. I mean, as you said, they dabble in logistics, but most of the logistics are sorted by the people that are using Shopify as a platform.
Correct.
That's all fair to say. So think about these people, these thought leaders, these thought individuals that are based, their profession is knowledge. All right. And it kind of reminds me of our last conversation, where we talked about people that are removed, the knowledge workers that are removed from the people that turn the wrench, and how it translates or doesn't translate thoughts to deeds, thoughts to actions, the difference between strategy development and strategy deployment. And, that led off a whole other set of conversations about, will there or could there be the possibility of elitism of these people that are knowledge workers versus the people that are turning the wrench? The
class struggle between the front office and the back back shop.
Right. And, that already existed. We already saw it in corporate, the corporate world, where the people coming up with the ideas really were out of touch or didn't completely understand how those ideas were going to become a reality. And will this even further exacerbate that that challenge, and to what end? In the lean world, which I come from and you come from also, there's a thing called Gemba. Okay, Gemba roughly is a Japanese word. Roughly translated is go to the real place.
Yeah, the place of value.
The place of value, where the action's happening, where the rubber meets the road. Okay,
Yep.
and if you don't get that opportunity, how can you understand in context what is really going on and what is needed to go on in order to be successful? So, and my biggest challenge or my biggest concern is that the knowledge workers might gravitate towards or even amplify their being towards an elite status versus the troglodytes on the ground. If anybody is a Trekkie, they'll understand that.
Yeah.
So I think with that, I think we should introduce Sam into the conversation.
Well, Sam brought this whole thing up in our last chat. So, hey, Sam, how you doing, man?
Hey, Mule. Hey, JP. I'm doing pretty well. Not seeing any unexpected things flying over Sweden either. So,
my understanding is that you guys might be fast-tracked into the EU now, right? Or into NATO.
There is talk about it.
Yeah.
Although I will admit that I'm not an expert on international politics, so I'm strictly in the wait and see.
I don't think that the people that are in international politics are experts in international politics, as a matter of fact. So
that is probably worryingly close to the truth, JP.
Yeah, unfortunately. So you brought up a great conversation last time. It was certainly worthy of a session devoted to it. What do you think is going to happen here? I mean, there's a lot of people that don't want to go back to the office, and understandably so. I knew a lot of people in upstate New York, Westchester County. They would spend an hour or more each day going to the office on the train. And, this remote work has given them 3 hours of free time that they didn't have before. And I could see them being resistant to wanting to go back to the office, but the office is where the rubber met the road, at least started to meet the road. And of course, they had, captains of industry having their facilities and their manufacturing and whatnot, being further afield. But what do you think some of these challenges might be, and what do you think the prognosis is for the future?
I agree with a lot of what you said about the challenges. I mean, coming from the agile world and having moved into the lean world, and the collaboration with the end users have always been one of the key messages that people who are developing a product or process or service can't just sit in their own workshop and work on it forever. They need to constantly go out and show what they built, include the users, get feedback, shorten the feedback loops. So I can definitely see the concern with innovation possibly suffering. I do think that the remote work needs to be seen in a global perspective, though. I mean, we're facing massive problems with urbanization, with more and more people cramping together into very small plots of land. We have cities like London and New York City, which are hives of humanity with enormous costs on the environment, on the waste we generate, on producing and shipping enough food and goods to actually feed these human hives. And
those foods don't come from the city; they go to the city.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And so we are basically using more and more of the country to feed fewer and fewer hotspots, with all of the logistical challenges that means. And I think we saw even during COVID how vulnerable we've become to these centers of humanity, which in no way can be self-sufficient. So one of the things that opened me up to the possibility of remote work and the benefits is the fact that we have lots of beautiful countryside where a lot of people want to live. I'm a city boy, born and bred. I can't really imagine another life right now, but I do realize that this may not be, if I were to start a family, where I would want I wouldn't want my kids playing in the highly trafficked streets outside. But there is no work, and we are seeing all across at least the Western world, small town life is disappearing more and more because people can't make a living there. I think that remote work, these Zoom towns, as I've heard them referred to, I think it opens up a lot of socioeconomic possibilities, which could allow people to have a higher quality of life. And let's be honest, today, one of the biggest challenges in the Western world, at least, we have it pretty comfy like that, I guess, is the whole stress, the pressure of being surrounded by people. I think that this is worth considering.
Okay, so let me give you an alternative view. All right, looking at the real estate in the United States. All right, you have people moving to low tax, no tax states, moving out of the city because they realize, guess what? I could work from anywhere. During the pandemic, these highly paid individuals realized they could work anywhere. And they could sell their $1.5, $2 million homes in Westchester County and buy a home twice as big for half as much or less in South Carolina, say. All right. Now you think about this, they sell their house for $2 million in Westchester County. They got $2 million in their hand. They could go down, they see the same exact house for $750,000. Well, they could bid that thing up for $1 million, or they could get, a $400,000 house and bid it up to $500,000 because they're paying cash. Okay. Now they're remote working. They're going to be higher income workers. But what about the people that were there already? All of a sudden, they're priced out of a home because guess what? They weren't working on Wall Street. They were working, as farmers. They were working as lower income workers. They were factory workers. So here's the double-edged sword, right? You have these remote workers that are able to seek a better life, but at the same time displace the people that were there who can't afford that better life anymore.
I think that is definitely a valid point, JP. I will admit it's not one I have thought about that much, which I guess shows that I'm a city dweller first and foremost.
Yeah, and so this is the whole idea about and the theme is about the elites versus the troglodytes. You know what I mean? And now we have a situation where these people that are really quite and you just admitted yourself, unaware. This is not through malice. There's no nefarious intent. Okay, people aren't out there to say screw the little guy. Well, maybe there's a minority that is, but
it's an unintended consequence.
Yeah, exactly. But here it is. We have to be more, and I guess this is the point I'm trying to make, is that we, being able to be that kind of have that fortunate to have that kind of freedom, we have to be sensitive and understand, be empathetic to the people that were already there. Okay, not to accidentally have them displaced or exploited. And this comes back down to business. If our remote workers don't have the opportunity to go to the Gemba, go to the real place, see the real stuff, and they're just force feeding their strategies that have been developed on the people that are supposed to be deploying that without actually have been there and seen it. I think that's very, very perilous situation. Even in the military, the strategies might be developed in the Pentagon. For those people that are Americans, developed in the Pentagon, but they're executed locally under local command and control. The people that are seeing the battlefield for what it is in real time. So I think that there's a lot to be said for being able to go to a manufacturing facility and feel the vibration of the machine and smell the machine oil, and actually talk to the people and break bread with them and find out what their challenges are, and not force remotely, however bright we might be, on those that have actually got to develop it.
It reminds me of something I read about W.R. Gore. W.R. Gore Corporation, whenever a location gets above 150 people at that location, they split that part of the business up and they create a new product group. They don't let any location be more than 150 people in personnel. And that location is responsible for all of its accounting, bookkeeping. It's run as its own business. Mm-hmm. And part of that is that Gore's philosophy has been that the people who are running the business need to be at the business. They can't be in some sort of central office. And the central office people are basically just making sure that the back office functionality, the shared systems are all working and supporting what's happening in each one of those plants. It's also similar to how Nucor has structured themselves, with a very tiny corporate team, and then everybody who's really involved in the operations of the business and the financing of the business work out in the mills. They're right. In the mills. If you think about Gemba in the Japanese language, Gemba is really two parts of two different words, two different meanings. Gem is value and ba is place of. So you put ba on the back of something and it means the place of. And so Gemba is the place of value, where value is created. But something else that I learned a long time ago about how organizations generate knowledge and create knowledge, written by a Japanese scholar, Ikuro Nonaka, talks about going to the ba. And you enter ba when you are talking to somebody else like we are today, and we're sharing ideas, we're sharing our tacit knowledge, and we're making that tacit knowledge explicit to the people that we're having that conversation with. We're articulating it. And in that, we not only share the knowledge, but then it also helps build our knowledge structures as we're thinking about it in our heads. Mm-hmm. And you have to, the way Nonaka talks about it is you enter into the place of ba where you feel safe and comfortable to have that conversation with people who you think will also understand what you're talking about.
Right. So I think that's a great segue into introducing our next guest, who's probably one of the most empathetic lean leaders I've ever met. John, you still with us?
Yes, I am indeed.
Excellent. Welcome back to the Inn, John. It's been a while.
Hey, good to see you, John.
You raised some interesting points as usual. Certainly, what's closer to home to me is my son actually works for a bank, and he works from home now. And there's been a huge emphasis on taking banks out of the high streets and shopping malls. And so what tends to happen, though, is the fact that where he works on his own, there's no social interchange. So I'm not really sure that it's good for him, because he could go month after month without seeing anybody. He could have his food delivered, which his mother does a lot of the time. And so where is that? Just the simple basics. People deal with people, people talk to people, and there's value in that. And you've touched on it as well. When you put it into a work environment, there's things he's learning about from the way he's dealing with his customers that may be of value to the larger enterprise. And as a customer of some of these banks at the moment, the service being provided is abysmal, because I believe that there are two groups of people: the people who understand what's going on, and a huge group sat in somewhere that don't know what's going on, and they're totally disconnected. I got in touch with a CEO of Barclays the other day because I just couldn't get something simple sorted out. So I got into LinkedIn, found out who she was, and got hold of her. Outlined a few things that she should know about in a very professional way, but she had no idea what was going on.
And I think that's the big risk there, John, about remote work. Like I said, we were already one step removed when all the knowledge workers were in the office and all the wrench turners were on the shop.
Yeah.
And now we're two steps removed because the knowledge workers are no longer even in the office where they can collaborate real time, throw ideas off of one another. Now they're all working, remotely. And I think that certainly there's got to be a loss of fidelity. Okay. In the information that you're able to collect and transmit, there's got to be a loss of fidelity because of that extra step. It's just as if, any other transmission of information. Every time you go through an interpreter or a device that interprets, you lose fidelity. And I think that's where I think that's a real risk.
I think it's worse than that because my son, that generation, are losing the skill to be able to have that interchange because they never had to do it.
You're talking about basic social skills.
Yeah, I mean, at a basic level, add the complexity of working social skills, and he's got very limited because he's never had to.
So are you saying that the next generation is going to have the personality of actuaries?
I think it's more of a concern at a base level. How are they going to learn how to share things and then overlay the work environment? How are they going to learn from those things from each other? If they're not, as a sales guy many years ago, I was told people buy from people. So that always stuck with me. You've got to be in front of somebody to understand. And
watching this from, at the high school level with the students on the robotics team, one of the things that we actually did, we picked up and started to do as far as the team was concerned, was the team's got a code of conduct. And in years, there's times where we had to emphasize code of conduct, but not very often. It was there. People understood what that code of conduct was. They could see it in action. They could see it in display of how the students who've been with the team longer conducted themselves. But after a year and a half of virtual and coming back, we had to basically get demonstrative is the word I'll use with code of conduct, and identify behavior that was acceptable and identify behavior that wasn't acceptable. One of the pieces of behavior that's unacceptable is if somebody's working on the bench and they've got their tools out, and they turn away to go get something else, you don't come up and take their tools. And that's a pretty common courtesy, but they hadn't been taught it. And so we had to teach them that.
Yeah.
And you just can't do that remotely. Or if you try to, it's all right, I'm formalizing what used to be really you learned it through observation. It became tacit to you because you saw it demonstrated to you and went, oh, that's the way I need to behave.
Yeah, but one of the things I'm talking about though, David, and let's use your robotics as an example. What if the people designing the robot were all designing it through telephony, through Zoom calls and through emails? They never met face to face. And the people that were building the robots were all meeting face to face, but they didn't meet the people designing the robots at all. Okay.
That happens today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is really my point, is that, the loss of fidelity between strategy development and strategy deployment. Okay. And the ability to have the two-way conversation and the people designing being able to see the people doing and say, you know what, you're right, I see it now.
Yeah. I think that there's not only the loss of fidelity, but there's also the loss of velocity and loss of acceleration or deceleration.
Right.
And that the speed of innovation is harder if you're not in the same place and space and with the people that are actually, bending your metal. That's why it's very important for us when we build these robots that they are together. We did a program to where they were all remote, but to do that, they got kits that had instructions. And even with that, only about 40% of the kids were successful in completing their robot.
Okay, so let's take this a step further. And I get, this is where I'd like to get Sam back involved here and John. Take this a step further. We're talking about transactional activity, building something. Okay, what if psychologically and sociologically, people start becoming the knowledge people become more elite than the people turning the wrenches? Okay, because the people turning the wrenches are now really the ones executing the commands of the knowledge workers. It's no longer a two-way street, or potentially it's no longer a two-way street. It's a download from the elites to the workers. And I don't want to go all Karl Marx here, okay? Because that's everybody that knows me knows this is not my thing, all right? But what I am concerned about is the lack of empathy that could be planted and that seed could grow. And I don't think that, just like as Sam mentioned earlier about moving out into the country and not really realizing that, he could do that because he's got that level of freedom, but the people that are there don't. And so this is what I'm worried about, is that we start not being able to relate to or be empathetic to one another.
I think you've got the whole aspect of learning. How do people learn? And primarily, it's usually done by doing something. It's not by listening to something. So that whole interchange, if you put engineers in front of what they've designed with the guys who actually put it together, that learning experience is amplified many times over.
Right.
And that learning, as I think you've already mentioned, is accelerated, because I know for a fact people bounce off of, oh yeah, have you thought, oh yeah, we could, oh yeah, all those sort of conversations. And that's where the real gems come from.
Right.
So if you disconnect, excuse me, COVID cough. If you disconnect those wires, and I think it's already happened many times, if your new product design, if those guys are not close to the manufacturing plants they have, then it slows down and they don't learn. And I see it with young engineers now. They come up with these things, you can't possibly make it. They can't physically make it. And the only way to connect those back up is to put hands on, face to face.
Right.
It's not the
So Sam, what are some of your thoughts?
Well, you guys have raised so many interesting points. I've actually been taking notes a little bit to keep everything in my head. I think that the Gemba principle, I kind of want to backtrack to it, because I think it's an excellent point, but I think there is also an excellent counterpoint. I mean, you remember the first and only time we met, Joe?
Yes.
Yeah, we spoke at the same conference. We spoke for a couple of hours afterwards. That's the only time we met face to face, and that was quite a few years ago. I think it was 2016, because I just moved back to Stockholm, and since then, we've kept in touch over LinkedIn. We've kept in touch over the phone occasionally. Although I admit I'm pretty bad at scheduling those calls. I've been a guest at the Outliers a couple of times. I think that, it's obviously we would have a better collaboration if we could meet face to face regularly. But we need to compare, if we didn't have the possibilities to collaborate mostly digitally, we would have probably lost touch. And if we met again after, 6 years, we would probably be strangers to each other. And, we are having an opportunity here digitally to meet and share ideas, people who would normally never meet. I think, I suppose there is an actual chance that I would run into Mule sometime during my travels, and we would start talking about building robots and Gemba. But we got to admit, those odds aren't great. So
Right.
I feel we do need to consider the fact that, yes, digital interactions, remote work, it does present some obstacles, but it also opens up a lot of opportunities of people who would normally never meet, who would never have a chance to connect, and especially not repeatedly, can do so and can create value together in ways which wouldn't have happened otherwise. I also think, because you raised, I think, Mule, you have been very eloquent in, the challenges in you as well, John, about teaching and knowledge sharing when it comes to remote work. But we have to remember, this is something that got sprung on us out of nowhere during a pandemic. And, everybody's just trying to stay alive, literally speaking, and doing the best they can. I think that we need to remember that once we develop this, we will find new ways to teach. I mean, I imagine if you could get the best teacher in the world, like get the best math teacher in the world, the person who's best at making students understand mathematics, make mathematics interesting, even to people who are normally not math people. You put them together with the person with several, Fields Medals winners, people who really know mathematics, and you put them together with experts on learning, and you create a curriculum by these, world-class experts, which is taught by the best math teacher in the world. And then that is recorded and edited by, professional videographers. We could, obviously, there would be challenges to this, but we would also be able to bring a whole different level of skill and ability to help solve many problems. And I know then somebody's going to say, what will happen to all those other teachers? That's been a challenge whenever we've had new technology. Once we had tractors, what will happen to all the people who were digging in the fields manually? Once we had industrial robots, what will happen to the people who were manufacturing things by hand before? So there are challenges, but with the risk of sounding like one of those optimists, which I'm definitely not, I do feel that you gentlemen may be focusing quite heavily on the challenges and not really discussing the possible upsides that we could have from this.
One of the things, Sam, I think you're touching on something that's a truism, is that we tend to try to think of things as good or bad, binary, and actually it's just an analog, it's a continuum. And there's challenges. You can be successful. I look at what Sarah Khan has done with Khan Academy, which is teaching math. He wasn't a math teacher. He was a Wall Street analyst. He was an investment analyst, but he started putting these web classes together for his nieces to teach them math, teach them algebra. And Khan Academy now is massive, at least here in the US, as far as teaching math, science. You pick the subject and it's there. There's commercial models that are doing that same thing, master classes. And so if you want to learn how to write like Aaron Sorkin, you can take his master class. And that is virtual. It is done remotely. I've also seen where some of the examples of some of the best instructors in live situation with classrooms got put in a studio and said, all right, go teach your class. And they had the most unbelievably boring presentation because there was no audience for them to work from, nobody to look at and be able to see and get that feedback and reaction. And so, there's a great deal that I've done in my career where I ran operations in China and that remotely sitting in Philadelphia. But I also had been there. I'd been to the Gemba. I had seen and knew some of these people and knew what their situation was and communicated with them. So I think that, we have tools. Does it make it to where we are creating this stratification between, social classes? It could. That's what JP's concern is. My concern is more is the misapplication of it. Oh, we can do this virtually, where you really do need to go to the Gemba.
Right.
And
one of the things that I'm not afraid of progress. You know what I mean? I'm not concerned about that. People are concerned, well, geez, the robots are going to do this and the robots are going to do that. Well, first off, who's going to build the robots? Other robots? I mean, and by the way, robots are going to break down. Who's going to fix them? I mean, try to find a good plumber, right, David? I mean, you'll have to wait weeks. HVAC in the heart of winter goes down. Those people make good money. So I'm not worried about that. There used to be people that made buggy whips, okay, and wood spoke wheels and saddles, and those people, are few and far between nowadays. There's, I'm sure, still some of them. Furriers, how many furriers are there out there compared to when how many there used to be? So I'm not too worried about progress creating or eliminating jobs, because there will always be jobs for the people that know to get the skills necessary for the next generation employment market. Just like coders, everybody used to cut code in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s on their computer. Now we got the thing called low code, no code, right? Now you just have to design. Now you have to just be a designer. So I'm not worried about progress creating some big void of unemployable people. What I'm concerned about mostly is that the people that are more manual are looked down upon by the people that are less manual. And that's the only thing that really concerns me. I love remote work. You know what? I've been working remotely since before it was cool. I'm here in Germany since 12 years ago. All right. When I left my office in Binghamton, which, by the way, was already half the size due to remote work, I mean, we went completely 100% virtual again before it was cool. So I'm not worried about the remote work, but I am worried that that lack of tactile integration and communication might be we might be missing something because of it.
I have a comment on that, but I think John, you've been very quiet, so I think we should let you in.
Well, I'm more worried about the mental stability of people that work from home. There are some people it suits very well, and there's a lot of people it doesn't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
And I think it's been noticeable in the UK, just by talking to people, similar conversations where their young offspring are working from home. Some love it and are thriving on it, and some actually hate it. And it's down to the character of the person, a lot of it as well. And if you've underpinned that in society, then you really are going to start to separate out people in many levels, how they work, how they interchange. And I think it's not a world I would want to get into, that remoteness. I'm a team player. I like to see flesh on flesh, eye to eye, and I think I can see what Sam's saying about the benefits, and there are some, but I think that usually where there's a benefit, there's an equal and opposite negative. So I think it's just going to be a balance of how companies deal with it and how they learn how to deal with it and how people learn how to deal with it. And if you don't like to work remotely, then you go get a job in an office or go become a plumber and go and see people. And
hey, I'll tell you what, plumbers make good money. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. We had a big swing in the UK from everybody should go to university, and now to get an electrician, a plumber. I've just had a new kitchen fitted, and I thought I was buying the company. I mean, it's hellishly expensive people to work with their hands because they're just not out there. They're all in university thinking about how they can design a kitchen. Well, that's not much good to me. I need it fitted. as you very rightly said. Anyway, it's not a world I want to be in.
I'm with you 100% there, John. What, you had something to say there, Sam?
Well, yeah. And I guess it comes back to the point I made the last time we spoke about this as well, that I do think that there is a great reason to be worried about the social stratification, about, the movers and shakers having no empathy for those who are, moved and shook. But I think we have that already. I have a hard time seeing how, how remote work is a major contributor, because we already have, those people who are working on Wall Street, they're at the office at Wall Street, meeting other people who went to elite business schools, and they are commuting to the same high-end neighborhoods where, other people who work at Wall Street, or, maybe, elite doctors or lawyers are living, and they see the people who are, who are doing the dirt. Mostly they see the people who are doing the dirt work, who are doing all those things that make society actually work. Because let's be honest, we probably need, more plumbers than, lean management experts or agile coaches. If we
or
all
lawyers,
if we all go on a strike, it's gonna be, if you and I go on a strike, JP, it's gonna be okay. Mule, your students are probably gonna miss you pretty soon. But that's the truth of it, But my point is, those people who are working on Wall Street and who are living in, neighborhoods where people work at Wall Street, they are already seeing this. Now, if anything, I could imagine, I do see a problem with what you raised, JP, about, they're pricing people in smaller towns out of the houses. But on the other hand, it might actually mean that, living in a town, living in a neighborhood where not everybody is working at Wall Street, because there aren't that many people working at Wall Street, you might actually get to see the other side, which I think a lot of the decision makers today aren't. Because, you might do the Jamba walk, you might go down to the factory, and if you're a high-powered executive, you may even speak to the workers, who I am sure will give you a clear, unbiased picture, because, no executive ever fired a honest worker because they spoke up about real problems. That doesn't happen. But, then the executive goes home to his or her partner, who is probably, educated to a similar level, and their children are going to school with other people, with other children whose parents are executives or lawyers or doctors. They're not meeting many plumbers or housekeepers, except when the housekeeper comes around and actually cleans their house. I think this is I will agree with you, JP. I think this is one of the biggest challenges we as a society are facing. That how do we, reward progress? We want it to pay off, to pay to work. We want, if you're doing good things, if you're building things people want, you want to be, you should be successful. But how do we prevent that from resulting in, a culture where the successful people are mingling only with the successful people and forgetting about everybody else?
Yeah, of course, we got to be a little sensitive here. What we deem as, successful. I know many people that remember when the financial crisis hit, I never knew how many poor rich people I knew. Okay, they were leveraged just as much as people that had lesser means. They're just their cash flow just had a couple more zeros, plus and minus. So it's really I don't like. You could be a farmer, you could be a ditch digger, you could be anybody that you want to be, doing anything you want in life and still be successful. So let's. Maybe we'll use the word affluent. How's that? More affluent than another.
I think that's a good point, and you are correct. I will blame the fact that English is my second language,
and we'll accept
Take that.
Yeah. So excellent. So I think that we've pretty much run to the end of this conversation. What do you think, there, Mule?
I think we've beat it up pretty good. The horse is definitely sweaty.
Yeah.
And ready to get brushed down to go to the barn.
And I will say that pretty much everybody on this call, we don't have to worry about as far as stratification of society is concerned. I think that everybody on this call, in fact, is probably pretty well dedicated to building bridges between those stratifications should they occur.
It's the hallmark of what we do, I think.
I think so. John, great having you back at the inn as always. Don't be a stranger. I hope you get over your ailment really darn quick.
Yeah.
And other than the ailment, Sam, I hope that you join us back at the end real soon. Do let me know if the gummy beer reaches you.
I will.
Excellent.
I definitely will. You will get a LinkedIn tag when I'm posting with the most expensive beer ever.
Excellent. I look forward for you keeping the paperwork because I'd like you to share that.
I will.
It's $3. It's $3 worth of beer and $150 of transit and import duties.
Yeah. So I guess there's only one thing left to say.
Well,
don't drive like my brother.
Then don't drive like my brother. Have a great time. Thanks for joining us, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
You have been listening to another episode of the Outliers Inn with your hosts, Joseph Paris and David Schneider. This program is produced by the Operational Excellence Society and sponsored by Zonotech Consulting Group International.